a website is worth investing in well enough because I think of it as a high leverage asset. So there's
Mm-hmm.
also this argument I make about, well, this is really worth, everyone's going to come to our website at some point in the journey.
Right. Yep.
At some point, they're going to come and kick the tires, look at us. So that website needs to be good.
Hello, and welcome to the Misadventures in Marketing podcast, brought to you by the American Marketing Association, San Francisco. I'm Steve Haney, a fractional CMO in Silicon Valley.
And I'm Peter Farago, a career high-tech marketer, also in the Silicon Valley. Each week, Steve and I come together to talk about important topics in marketing in the Silicon Valley.
We'll be sharing our own experiences running marketing teams with a special focus on technology startups, our successes, our failures, what worked, and what didn't. We'll also be inviting our CMO friends and other marketing colleagues onto the show every once in a while, and hopefully impart some wisdom along the way. Hey, Peter, how's it going?
It's going great. A little bit of rainy winter. I started a new full-time job at a startup, so I'm in that.
Congrats.
Thank you. Getting to know everybody and starting to figure out what's what. It's going to be one of those sprints for prioritization, but it's very exciting, and I'm very grateful to be working with what looks like a super cool team.
Excellent. Well, it's been the holidays around here. Absolutely bonkers. Kind of like starting a new job and thinking about what to do with a website. How's that for a transition?
It's a pretty nifty segue, I must say. So yeah, look, I'm going to do the dramatic, take my glasses off and think about it, because the truth is, yes, the timing is really good to talk about this. It is all about a new job, a new website. Should you go all in or pump the brakes? And, there is a little bit of a joke about how, every new marketer that joins a team wants to redo or give the brand a facelift and then redo the website. And so today we're going to talk about, is that a right move? Should you do it before you do it? What to ask yourself, how do you go about it? And so on. So that's kind of the topic. Have you had to redo a bunch of websites in your career, Steve?
Oh my God. Are you kidding? Yeah. Mostly because, as you know, the stage you and I are traditionally coming in at, just for our listeners, Peter and I have definitely done big company stuff, and we've had roles beyond marketing as well throughout our careers. But mostly, and I think the ones we have most fun in are early stage tech startups where a lot of this is not done. And what I've found is that the website, when I come in to that kind of scenario, is what I call brochureware. And I always look at the company website as especially with B2B and B2B SaaS, is an app to generate leads. And it's really got to be. And so my whole thing is I've got to turn this thing from brochureware that's got a lot of information to, it's got to be able to cookie folks, it's got to be able to track them. It's got to be able to capture their information. And then, of course, when you get relevant information, when they line up, they actually give you a name and an email address. It's got to be able to light up that whole trail that the prospect, through maybe months, has been looking and kicking the tires, so that we can then feed all that data reliably to sales. And that is a lot of work. So yes, definitely run into this. And what I found is the real job, as I see it, and I'm going to very eager to hear your thoughts, is going from brochureware to lead capture.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you say all that, I go, man, that sounds great. And it is probably sometimes years to get to where you're talking about. The case I'm in, they do have a competent little website. It's just, it was kind of put together by engineers. I'm sort of the first business, real business person and really kind of, experienced marketer, of course, joining the team. CEO is incredibly smart and has done a great job, but he also just can't focus on it. He's wearing many hats, as one does. So when I look at this particular one, I think about the foundation and getting, honestly, a really good narrative out there that represents us well and is compelling. I think of it first as a destination, and maybe that is brochureware, but when
Mm-hmm.
people get there, I want us to understand, maybe as a product marketing exercise, I want us to understand exactly what we do and why it's better, the differentiation and all that. And then, of course, I want to think about conversion. So, in my head right now, I'm thinking about attracting and converting leads, and I'm thinking about the very basic building blocks. And it goes all the way down to, what does the homepage say? What is H1? What
Mm-hmm.
third party validation do we have with logos and testimonials? And
Mm-hmm.
how well do we describe and show the product? In this case, one thing we do know is the product is easy to kind of get going and see how it works with your own data. And so we're trying to think very much
Can
about
I,
shortening that path, in
can
the
I ask
experience of
you
the website. Yeah.
something related to that? What are your thoughts about putting the management team up there? Because I can tell you what I do. If I go, especially to a startup, and
Okay.
that is untested, could go under within the next 2 or 3 years. What I want to feel good about if I'm going to buy from these guys is that they're the real deal, right? I want to know who they are. I want their LinkedIn, link there so I can go check them out. And then, of course, the investors, who the board is. So, if it's a big, let's say you're going to, I don't know, a HubSpot, or that's a big established public company, they're going to be around in one way, shape, or form. But if I'm going to a 10-person startup and you're asking me to check out your product and buy, all I've got, I feel, as a prospect at the end of the day, are the management team and the investors. So you were talking about logo validation, right? Definitely huge, right? It's like, okay, if this company's bought from these guys, they're, that gives me some comfort. But and the thing is, I go to a lot of startups' websites and there's nothing about the management team there. And that makes me very leery. Any thoughts on that, or am I off?
I could take it as a rabbit hole and a very specific question, but I actually think it's valid, right? So the way I'm thinking about it is that is an example of what I would call a quality signal, or something that builds credibility. Because it's true that it's a good reminder that these little companies are not known. And there is a worry, especially among slightly larger potential customers, that you'll even be around, and nobody wants to invest in something, you know, as a vendor, or a company as a vendor, if they're going to disappear, right? So I just kind of think of it as generically, I don't know this is a real term, but I call them quality signals, are things that build credibility, or some folks might call it third party validation, but that's not quite exactly it. But it's all these things that show that you have some trustworthiness, some credibility, some early reputation. And those include showing the team, showing the investors, uh, showing customer logos, customer testimonials, if you have them. In tech and software, I think it's becoming pretty common to look at G2. Um,
Mm-hmm.
G2 reviews.
Right.
There are all these things where you're trying to demonstrate that this company should have some credibility. And I think for certainly, you go through this list, this company has a known VC or reputable VC, so we would put that there.
Mm-hmm.
They have some great co-founders, including a couple professors from UC Berkeley's computer science department. That's worth putting on there, right? Of course, the CTO and the CEO each have their PhDs from Cal in computer science. So, and we make a technically oriented product. So do you put that on there? Yes, because I think among that audience, those things are very valuable, like reputable VC, uh, highly academically pedigreed founders with real credibility. Um, they have a great set of customer testimonials already, almost organically. So we can definitely pull and show a lot of that. I think the logos they have right now are not huge. It's pretty typical. They have a
Mhm.
few known logos, but we'll certainly put those. But if you're putting yourself in the shoes of a new visitor, that let's say is a prospect, is kind of like trying to kick the tires and see what this company's all about, or just like, hey, can I use a everyone's wondering, can I use an AI thing? This is an AI oriented company. Can I use this AI thing to help me do something that I used to do, but more efficiently now? What is this thing they're trying to learn? If they start to see, hey, I understand what this product does, maybe it even shows some reputable research about its efficacy. It has some logos. It has some customer testimonials. You go check out the team. You see that, right? You see who they are. Oh, there's a real VC behind them. Um, at least in tech circles among SMB and mid market, those quality signals will add up to building up a pretty good reputation as quickly as you can. Of course, if you
Mhm.
start to get press, and it's always hard to kickstart press for a little company. It's another topic possibly, but the trend over the last decade or so is that editorial teams at news outlets have been shrinking at editorial outlets. There are fewer and fewer reporters and journalists in the world to cover the news, and they don't want to cover your promotional stuff. They need to cover real news. So it's getting
Mhm.
increasingly hard. So, but if you can get that, that helps as well. So I put this initial question you have around the About Us page and listing people. The one thing I'll ask is, and this I'll give this question back to you, is do you put just the leadership team or do you put the whole team? Some companies will list everybody on the team.
Just the leadership.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And the board members. Again, because I'm looking at that website as generating business, and prospects come there. And, you know, I mean, maybe it's because I'm older now. Maybe if I were in my 20s, it'd be like, oh, this is fun. Let's get all 25 employees up there and show them in goofy hats and stuff. I just want to make sure that the prospects who come there get the information they need, engage with us online, so then I could capture a lead, qualify it, hand it over to sales. Maybe in terms of branding, showing, everybody, all 30 employees there at a startup can, communicate certain things about your culture, because, it's also a recruiting. I mean, we don't talk about this
Right.
enough, but it's a recruiting tool as well. And especially in our industry, this has been the case for God knows how many decades now. Is it's all about talent. There's that old saying that, in the software business, your inventory walks out the door every evening. Um,
That's
or,
true.
or
Yeah.
at least, goes to bed at 1 a.m. and gets back up. But,
Right.
the point is, it's all about talent. So, I could certainly see doing, the whole thing, because you're trying to communicate to potential recruits something about the
Yeah.
culture. But for the most part, no, I would just include the management team and the board of
I mean,
directors,
it's
so that those
true. It's
prospects
true.
feel comfortable.
Well, look, if the company's small, I think putting everybody on there makes you look small, too small, probably, right? And so it goes
Mm-hmm.
against what you're trying to, the perception you're trying to show or
Mm-hmm.
build. And your other point made me think that, of course, you've got to consider various audiences, right? Like potential investors, potential
Mm-hmm.
customers, certainly, possibly press, definitely potential employees, right? So you've got to think that your website can handle several audiences visiting and all that. But primarily we're looking at the customers, we're looking at the business, we're looking at converting. That's what we're really. It's very revenue oriented early on. Look, we're proving the product, we're proving that people will buy it, proving that they'll keep it, we're proving that we can scale that. Right? That's the game. You are betting that you've come up with something that is valuable that people want, and the only way to really prove that is to get more people paying for it.
I would also like to talk to you about, at this stage, again, early stage tech startup, things that gain you content that gains you credibility in what you put up, like a white paper, right? And getting things like that up there, because those are obviously for the purchasing group or team or whoever's making the decision, prospect, can build a ton, especially if you've got like a very advanced tie-in, you know, wizard kind of technology that you're trying to sell. You know, a technical white paper can go a long way in pushing you up the consideration set, and just how you feel about that kind of thing.
There are different stages that a customer's in, like loosely upper and middle funnel. So there are upper funnel assets that are probably designed more to attract. You're doing a keyword analysis. You've got a content program that's talking about, I don't know, which AI tools, should your technical team review this year? Let's say that's a little more of an upper funnel piece, let's say. But then, once the person gets to your website, and you're imagining them a little more in a evaluation stage, a consideration stage, maybe, you're offering middle of the funnel assets, and this is loose, but, usually people put white papers and gated content and webinars. And I don't know,
Right.
every other day I'm seeing on LinkedIn people saying yes or no. And it's like, go do this for 20 years like I have. It's like, you're going to do a white paper, because I do think one of your next best ways of winning someone over who's a serious buyer or decision maker or evaluator or whatever, influencer in the process, is to, first show those quality signals. This is what it does. The promise of it's pretty compelling. It fits with what they really need. You're showing that other customers have used this and they're happy with it. You're showing that the team behind it is strong, right? You're showing all these things, well-backed startup. And then I agree with you. I think the next thing is like, what is our philosophy? What is the reason for being? How do we think about it? And that thought leadership, especially if you're, I think, a higher end team like the one I've just joined, and I've been on some other ones, thought leadership becomes a real viable option for you as a strategy. These guys can talk all day long about very advanced, even foundation level modeling, right? These guys are
Right.
super deep. These guys are super deep in all that, all the way down to the deepest parts of the stack, and like the open AI and Llama type infrastructure. They could talk about all that very credibly. There's a lot of research going on at Cal that they're just two professors involved with are associated with, that talk about things like the doubling of the data set, of the total data set ingested by a foundational LLM is the thing that's driving the most gains in performance, but that there's a theoretical limit to running out of all the information we have in the history of mankind. It's digitally recorded. And so we're going to actually keep doubling the point where we can't take any more data in. And then we're going to have to think about other ways of extracting additional precision. And so, can another company offering a little product talk about that? No. So should we then get people thinking about the fact that we think at a higher level and have these white papers and documents? Yes. So for me, in my head, yes, thought leadership is a humongous part of it. The other thing too, though, is from a very practical standpoint, I mentioned this a little earlier, and I guess my point to the audience here is you got to think about the context of your company and what advantages or options you have available to you. What do you want your visitor to be able to do or see or understand when they arrive? It's as simple as that. In our case, I do want them to understand the product, that it has high value, that others are using it. There's a great team behind it. That team is deep. We can think big if we need to. But really, what this company's product does a particularly good job with is once somebody sees it working, they're like, oh my God, I totally get it. So then you start thinking about, how do I get them to do a trial? How do I get them to see an example of it or a demo? How do I get them to just drop a URL somewhere? So we take a little bit of their data and spit it out. And this is a type of agent. How do you get them to start playing with it using their own product and something they're familiar with, so they start to see the value of it? And so it's interesting. We were talking about this in my very first week last week, is, let's not beat around the bush with trying to do all this generic stuff with a website that we need to, but let's also think about just getting them, from A to B as fast as we can, putting their hands on the working version of a trial or POC. Like, how can we shorten that path? Because that sells the product quite well when people see it happening.
Mm-hmm.
with their own information and their own um, their own data put into our product, and that's pretty easy to get in there. So that's a consideration. I want a customer to take or a visitor to take a certain action. So, but taking a step back, I'll ask you, Steve, let's say we're talking about a pretty early version website that does describe stuff, well enough, but needs to be expanded upon. Maybe it's a couple page site. What do you think about in terms of, say, a checklist of,
Mm-hmm.
foundational tools and, things that it has to be able to do, jobs to be done?
This episode of Misadventures in Marketing is brought to you by Section, the leading online business school for the age of AI. Every ambitious person deserves a great strategic education. People who want to be great at their jobs now, not on someone else's schedule. That's where Section comes in. Section gives you the tools, frameworks, and strategies to get to work right away with no gatekeeping involved. Section knows from experience that AI has massive implications for marketers. Not only do they upskill 15,000 students a month, their own marketing team scored an expert level AI proficiency when tested. They're excited to bring even more marketers into the AI era, so they're offering an exclusive 20% discount to AMA SF members for their AI for Marketers workshop and the AI crash course. Just go to sectionschool.com and sign up using the code AMASF20. That's AMASF20 to receive a 20% discount on the AI for Marketers workshop and the AI crash course. Section, the leading online business school for real people. Education isn't just about what you learn, it's about what you do with it.
Gosh, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer this question very well, but I mean, I would just blocking and tackling like Google Analytics in there. Is that turned on? I mean, that's very easy to do. SEO and what are the keywords, right? And getting an SEO effort going. I certainly cannot do that myself. I've always hired SEO specialists to help me when I'm trying to, get a website fit for doing what it should be doing. And then, plugging in some kind of web capture, something, right? I mean, just getting that going. Maybe early stage startup doesn't have enough money for a HubSpot or Pardot or whatever marketing automation system may be out there. But, have your, the guy or gal who's running and building and running the website to get some kind of form up there. And then, depending upon the nature of the product, have the ubiquitous book a meeting button everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, those are kind of the immediate things you do that, like the basic blocking and tackling. And then, really preparing the CEO and the executive management team for the long haul, kind of the things we've described about getting a CRM if they don't have a CRM, and the marketing automation system, integrating that into the website. Of course, sounds like what you're looking at, you were talking about Webflow earlier, is getting the architecture down and what that, how that needs to work and what needs to be there and all these content elements we've spoken about. And then of course, the resources and, the content that we've been talking about, some of it gated, some of it not. And, making sure that that's part of the equation to get people there. So I'm not sure that's a great answer, but that's just off the top of my head is the way I'd kind of approach things. So
I think it's a perfect answer. It is kind of honestly sort of where I'm at. I think prior to this, most people would just use WordPress for a long time, but Webflow, of course, has become kind of a better,
Love
cooler,
Webflow.
easier.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
awesome.
Have you used Webflow on the job yet, or?
Yeah. Yep. My last big corporate company website redesign, we used Webflow with our
It
web
was good,
design
huh?
house. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the other alternative now, apparently, to Webflow, which is allegedly even lower code, Webflow is heralded for being a low code solution and having pretty good, in particular, having pretty good layout and I'd say motion, like when you move, things resolve and all that stuff, transition well. But I think it should handle responsive design well and all that stuff and
Right.
SEO. So all of that's supposed to be really good. The one that I hear about is Framer, and I looked at it. Framer works. One of the things that people like about Framer is a lot of folks are designing on Figma now for wireframing and design in general.
Right.
And apparently it's an easier import from Figma into Framer, which saves you a step to some degree, and you don't need as much engineering help with certain things. However, Framer, this is just Peter reading about this for 10 minutes this morning prior to you and I getting together, is that Framer may not be quite mature enough, and it may not, especially if you're going to scale in the longer term, you're probably better off staying with a Webflow. I've heard nothing but good things, and I think I've heard someone pretty reputable out in the community saying they estimate half of the Silicon Valley startups are on Webflow. So
interesting.
anyway, I think for my case, funnily enough, is that checklist you have is pretty straightforward. And I'm probably as of right now, if someone put a gun to my head, and apologies to anybody in the world for whom that is a terrible metaphor. But if there were a gun to my head, earmuffs, if that bothers you, sorry. Webflow, obviously Google Analytics, HubSpot. HubSpot can start out with a pretty inexpensive, I just think HubSpot is actually the number one adopted CRM in the world right now. It turns out that's not making it better or not better. I happen to have used it a while back. It's quite good. We are just using Notion for a CRM right now. It's just kind of a list. Well, it's so early, right?
What drives me crazy is early stage startups going straight to Salesforce, and it's ridiculous. It's just such overkill. So I admire that, honestly.
I remember implementing Salesforce at a startup that got to a certain level of scale, and it was crazy. And then I don't know, Salesforce is like
I always have to hire an admin because I can't. I tried, man. I can't generate the reports I want. When you really need something done, you have to have a certified Salesforce.
It's like a marketing ops
because they got a code, So listen, I honestly,
it's a great example of an ecosystem. They have such penetration and have done such a great job with the ecosystem around it that everything plugs into it. It is primarily the system of record. I don't really even know what rival Salesforce overall for a CRM.
Well, it's the point you were making before we came on camera about brand recognition and brand consideration being in the set. Salesforce has just done a great job. People, we have to have Salesforce, and there is no purchasing or procurement process. They just go buy it, and it's like, guys, you've got 3 sales. Direct sales.
I would love to look. It's funny. I was trying to get us on a different CRM running a small company in a company. I was at a very large tech company that had acquired a smaller company. I was running that, and we had a problem. They had Marketo, and it turns out the Marketo has a one-way sync to Salesforce. Basically, if I were to have used a different marketing automation solution, I believe, I would have then not been able to integrate into Salesforce because there was another map that was already taking that one spot. So basically, you had to go with one pair of a marketing automation platform and a CRM. That's really what it meant. So then I started thinking, well, maybe I should just get a different CRM. I don't really need to be hooked into the company's entire whatever. And so then I started looking at other CRMs as well. And I just did get very far down the road. But the reason I mention all that is it's sort of what you have to decide now. Some of these, where we are now in this company, is some of these decisions will have consequences as far as commitments into an ecosystem. And it's hard to really know. And you sort of go with what is flexible. But I think Webflow, Google Analytics, of course. I don't know that we need to do an Amplitude, a mixed panel, or something, Adobe. I don't think Adobe's probably a little more enterprising anyway, a different analytics system. I think HubSpot will work for us. I am definitely thinking about, it's funny you mentioned booking calendar meetings. Maybe we do an integration with a Calendly type thing, because then it's, what you're trying to do is reduce the friction of getting someone to talk to us, right? The one other thing that I was going to add to your list, which I think is perfect, by the way, Steve, because you don't want to get too fancy when you start. You need to, you really need to do is have people land on this and understand what it is and feel compelled to make the next step and have all the proof points that help them get comfortable with trying your thing. Like, that's kind of where you're at. And then really simple, clean, effective calls to action. I like to think about, especially when a company's earlier stage and you're still working out, what your best H1 will be, or maybe major layout A versus major layout B. If you can have a good A/B testing solution that allows you to really see what is doing a lot better, it can make a big difference early on. One that I've heard good things about that I have to look into is called Mutiny. I don't have any affiliation with them, but it's mutinyhq.com. So people can let me know if they like it. I'm going to go read about it. I might talk to them. Obviously, Optimizely's been around for a long time. And so I'm talking about that kind of A/B testing. I think that could be very interesting. The other one I'm thinking about, Steve, is because we have to do some kind of outbound motion, we have to do some outreach. There is a company called Outreach, kind of an SDR solution for outbound cold campaigns. But there's something called Clay right now that kind of organizes the entire pipeline of like defining your ISP, figuring out who that candidate list could be. You can work with some data enrichment to get it there. So let me take a step back and tell people where my head's at. You and I have talked about what the basics are, and we've talked about them, and we've talked about probably the most reliable, relatively well-known products for a smaller company. The truth is, we're also in an age where there are a million new AI-based solutions that could make a lot of these things more automated and interesting. So I have to not only set up the website and have it be competent for our business, but I also do want to try. Some of these AI tools, if you will, because it is such a fascinating place we find ourselves in. If I can avoid having full-time marketing operations people who's living in the project management and the updating of tech and measurement all the time and get back to the actual work.
Product could not agree
content
more.
Marketing.
Could not agree more. Yeah. So can I make one comment here?
Please.
It's just that, and again, it's just exciting that you get to go through this right now. It's just
it's a little exciting.
Back.
It's a little overwhelming too, dude. It's like, oh my God, I gotta make a bunch of choices.
Getting to step back and say, you know what? Fuck everything I've done in the past.
Yep.
Everything's moving so fast. Just completely rethink. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to any B2B purchase, it's a lot of money. And there are multiple people involved in the decision. And my feeling has always been, I just want to get, as the marketer, I'm going to get out of the way as quickly as possible to get the prospect in front of a BDR or a sales exec, because nobody's going to spend tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars without a human being in front of them, helping them navigate the product and make a decision. So my feeling is, look, I just want to get this prospect into a meeting as quickly as possible, right? That's why that book a demo or book a meeting button appearing everywhere on the website is so critical. And you're making this great point about, looking at these new tools, That's the objective. The objective is to get the prospect in front of a salesperson so that they can start that sales journey, get them through the opportunity pipeline. And if I can just get rid of the friggin' funnel, great. Because I need to do my qualification. And so looking at all these new tools, it's like, let's just step back, understand what the real objective is here, and start from scratch. Like, I mean, I know it sounds dumb, but like, do we really need forms on the website? Why not question that?
These are valid questions. No, we should, because look, at the end of the day, like, I mean, I think it takes thinking about your product in terms of whether it's what we might call a low involvement or a high involvement purchase decision. You just said, hey, B2B products that get sold need to go through a buying committee. So that's different people. There's the champion, and then there's the economic buyer, and there's maybe an influencer or a person who has authority to sign off or whatever. Maybe the CEO, the CFO, the VP of Eng, and maybe the director of tech support, who's really the day-to-day practitioner. So you got to think about these different audiences, and one's more of an ROI argument, and one's more of a save you time and do a better job argument. So there are those audiences to consider, and you want to spend your time thinking about how to attract and influence those folks and how to speak to them. And then again, I go back to something I kind of said in the beginning, almost kind of like a throwaway statement, but I do think about the jobs to be done on the website, what the website needs to do, and what I'm trying to get the people to do, which, you've talked about as book a demo, which is really a call to action. So we're talking about a lot of sort of classic immutable objectives that we have. It's like attract people to the site, speak to the right audience in the right way, understand what they're trying to do or learn or get done when they visit your site, and then think about what we want them to do, where we want them to go, which is ultimately either, if it's a self-serve kind of PLG motion, go buy the product, go test the product, or talk to somebody or download something to learn more about it, to get them on the way, like you said, in the opportunity pipeline. And for those who don't know, we mean sort of the Salesforce definitions of kind of stage, within the funnel. So like, are they a prospect? Are they a marketing qualified lead? Are they a sales qualified lead? Then they turn into opportunities later. The reason we use the word opportunity a lot is because that's where a customer, or that's where a prospect becomes more of a serious potential buyer, and we call that an opportunity. And that's when the sales team gets involved, because we're trying to save their time to work on higher probability deals that could close. We call that they close, and we want them to be something we win. So closed won versus closed loss. So that opportunity to closed won is what we're really focusing on. And like you said, skip the funnel, get them right there. We don't need a long funnel. We don't need something fancy. If it's a pretty easy decision to make and we have a low price to try, or it's a very low friction to try, then let's get them there first, right? We don't need to send them all over. So this comes back down to customer journey, right?
Right. Yeah. And again, I'm not saying that marketing doesn't have a responsibility to separate the wheat from the chaff, right? And get rid of the tire kickers. And, that marketing qualified lead when we hand it over to sales for them to decide whether to bin it or make it a sales qualified lead, we don't want to waste their time, right? I mean, the most precious resource in a B2B, company is the sales exec's time. Right, because they need to be out moving these deals along. And so it's our responsibility to, find prospects at scale, which a Salesforce simply cannot do because there's only so much time in a day for a human to dial for dollars. That's a valid thing to do. They need to do their prospecting, but I'm saying they're never going to be able to do it at the scale of for example, an online marketing campaign. That's the advantage marketing has, but also that we get rid of the tire kickers, so we're not wasting the time of that most precious resource as part of the go-to-market team.
Idea for marketing automation, and now one of the founders actually of Marketo, a guy named John Miller, who's a pretty good thought leader in the space, is going to launch a new company next year, and he's been talking about how the days of having the old way of doing B2B SaaS marketing with more content and more, you know, emails out to people and middle of the funnel downloadable gated content, and that's not working as much anymore. Of course, he's setting the stage for a new offering, but it could be a new way of it's a new way of thinking. But I guess what I was getting at was there's still taking the technology out of it and how we do it. There's still this component of someone somewhere at a company for whatever product you have is thinking they have a need, or you need to like make them aware. There's all these models or frameworks of like, are they aware or unaware of their problem, but whatever. At some point, somebody figures out, whether they figure it out themselves or you prompt them that, oh, I have a need. And then you want them to consider your solution as part of the consideration set, and you want them to discover you and evaluate you. And then when they get there, you need to have a certain amount of information and credibility and so on. And then you need to think about like what you want them to do next. That's all we're trying to do. And so you want to kind of have awareness of who they are and measure them. The original concept of marketing automation, and this was more in, I'd say, a steady state company that probably had a CRM like Salesforce, was the separation of the wheat and the chaff. So in Salesforce, you had all your activities, but what the marketing automation thing did is it added 2 columns, theoretically, that said urgency, right, and size of opportunity. So if you had a bigger opportunity that was much more interested in potentially buying in the quarter now, and they're giving you buying signals, that's where the salesperson should spend time. And then you've gotten the notion of lead scoring. Well, how do you know that? Well, they visited a pricing page, or they've downloaded XYZ, or I don't know what, or they've asked for a demo, or they attended a webinar. Whatever it is, you're looking for, you're trying to interpret these signals. It's not linear. We've always known it's not linear, but we've abstracted the model to hopefully a customer goes from left to right on some diagram we've made. But my point is, you're at the end of the day just trying to find the folks who are the potential customers who are more interested in you, and point the salespeople at those folks. And as you described, avoid the tire kickers, right? Like work on the things that can bring in revenue, including talking to the right folks at the right time. That's really, again, what we're after. You can get into the complexity of doing that with all this technology, of course. And, it needs to be done. When you start out simply, the way I am, you just need to have the major components in place. I have then scaled it from there with pretty elaborate setups. But, I think that that's where a company has a bigger budget. And to your point, you have contractors and teams, or you hire implementation specialists and other stuff. You have marketing ops people by then. And I'm not giving that short shrift. I'm just trying to say that I like to go back to the foundation and why we're doing certain things and what we're trying to achieve. And one of the things I like about a startup is that we just don't muck around with unnecessary complexity. And that's part of what's going through my head as I think about this setup, is just get what I really need that's going to work, but also won't box me in too much when I need to like scale it or expand it or broaden it, right? That's kind of where my head's at right now. And also, hey, there's a bunch of cool tools out there, and maybe some of that can save us time and make us much more effective as a company. But I also don't want to go down the rabbit hole of trying a bunch of new gizmos just because, right? Like I just need to get the core things done. So I have this balancing thing in my head.
And listen, especially working in tech, it attracts geeks, and you're like, ooh, shiny new thing.
Totally.
And it's got all this promise. So I'm going to go try that. And, it's not career ending, but maybe even job ending. So,
well, it's inefficient, right? Like you could be really good at trying out and figuring out all these possible new things and workflows and blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, you're not helping the company grow revenue, right? Like you could, it's just, you gotta do the thing. It's coming back to impact. Are you making impact in the areas that really matter for the business? And, we want to do them efficiently, and we want to execute extremely well. And of course, we want to present ourselves as a very professional, credible company. And then we want to be able to do that work really well, where we kind of know who we're talking to and can tailor the messaging and all that stuff.
Right.
But really, go ahead.
Well, we've been going on and on here, but I'm just curious about how you get everyone on board, how you sell this, because you're in the classic situation now of everybody's
Mm-hmm.
technical, everybody's product oriented, engineering pretty much runs the show and the culture. But now you've got to come in and say, okay, guys, this is all this go to market stuff that, and it's not even going to maybe even pay off for another 6 to 12 months, but this is what we got to, how do you make that sell? Right? These things, with the website, what you're planning. And of course, there are a lot of other aspects of go to market you have to make happen, but how do you make that sell? Because you have to, it's not just the CEO and some, the founders. I mean, you got to get
True.
everybody on board,
I mean,
get
I think
behind
in
you.
this case, we don't need the board. I don't think we need the board per se. I know in this case, the VC is the one who introduced me in. So some of it is, let's see, every situation's different. And I will say in this case, the team understands that they want to expand distribution. That they have a product that's working that customers really like, but that it's only been adopted by a certain set of customers, and they need to, and they have revenue. It's a small and growing amount of revenue, but it's already meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, next year I start with, this gets to how do I sell it? I start with what are the company's goals? In this case, we want to really get a multiple on ARR. We want to grow it quite a bit.
Right.
And we think we're kind of ready to push that. So, one thing I looked for, and I think I explicitly had this conversation, is I asked the CEO while we were having, call it interviewing or getting to know each other conversations. I basically asked, hey, do you believe that the best product always or usually wins? And to me, the answer is obviously not. I mean, there's many examples. And so I will say,
I would say 99% of the time, the best product does not win.
I mean, it's a little bit of both. I think you need both. It's much, just think about it. You can't put lipstick on a pig, right? If production throws something over the wall to you,
totally agree.
let's say the product, you get a lot of adoption. I've been in a company like this, will remain unnamed. We actually built what I thought, we had a great story. I thought I really amplified it. It was compelling. It was novel. It turned out that in the long run, churn was our problem, right? We kind of get a customer in, but we just couldn't keep them. The product wasn't delivering.
Right.
And this is not exclusive to
them.
There, Lots of companies.
Yeah, I've been
well,
there.
So what I'm saying is you definitely need both, but the best product may not win. So I was looking for, look, I want them to have a great product because I want a customer or a new customer to try it and be like, oh my God, this is quite good.
Yeah, and you
right?
like you said, you need something to work with. You want to have something to work with.
So I don't think it's 99%, but my point is, your question was like, how do I sell this? And so first of all, it's kind of the context. In this case, they have an aggressive revenue goal. They know they have a very good product, and they're probably the category leader right now in this emerging category, but they will not be able to keep that. They're not so precious about it. Like, we're going to keep this advantage forever. They know that other folks can catch up or do different things that are probably good enough. And so, so they are very much of the mindset where we have to move fast. That said, I think that, someone like me coming in who wants to be very aggressive, I do have to find out the limit of what they can tolerate. So the way I sell it is I start with kind of this narrative of, we want to achieve the following as a company. Where I think we're going to have the best impact is, these areas. So I think we need to do a small brand refresh that is, and a website kind of redo that will kind of up level the narrative, get a better destination that converts better, has the basic tooling in place that we can work off of. And I need it to be good enough for us to work on for the next 18 months and easy enough to update without mucking around with it, so we can get to work on thought leadership and content and attracting folks and converting them better. So to me, it starts with, what do we want to achieve in terms that everyone gets? And then I say, okay, there's a couple ways to do it. it depends how fancy I want to be. But I agree. I can do some SEO analysis myself. I've done it to a degree. I'm not a really deep specialist, but I can definitely do competent keyword analysis, but is it the best use of my time? And it gets very deep, especially in the technical SEO, that I would like to have someone like that involved. You always need a designer. We have an in-house designer, but I may have limited access to that person because they also are the product designer. So I need the design support. I need the technical SEO support. We already have a small web agency that they've already gotten, so I'm just going to work with that for now. And then I've got to see like what it takes to implement well. And I need a couple licenses for probably a HubSpot and a Webflow and some of these other things, which I don't think is going to be a big deal. I could need a PR firm because we have a launch coming up. I've done a lot of PR, so I know I can do it myself, but I also know it's time consuming. And so I'm trying to think about leverage. So part of it is coming up with a budget that's palatable, coming up with a set of things that we want to do from a marketing standpoint that make sense and align with the company's greater goals. And also kind of having a test and evolve attitude. Like, well, let's get this going. I think this will be good. And we can always make decisions. Is it a one-way door or a two-way door? You know, can you come back? Can you backpedal if the decision's not working out? So I kind of do it that way. With a small company, we don't have a budgeting process. And I've been in a big company where we have exhausted, but you know, it's really sort of like, I go to the CEO in my one-on-one and say, hey, dude, I think we need 3 things. I've kind of priced them out. I think they're this. If we don't like it, we can turn it off, whatever. But I think these are the things we need. A website is worth investing in well enough because I think of it as a high leverage asset. So there's also this argument I make about, well, this is really worth, you know, everyone's going to come to our website at some point in the journey.
Right. Yep.
At some point, they're going to come and kick the tires, look at us. So that website needs to be good in certain ways. So we should do the brand refresh. We should redesign it. And they're already on that. Like when I came in, they were already sort of doing it. So I don't have to sell that. I might have to sell how we do it. You know, do we go get a $50, $100, $200,000 agency, you know, contract? Probably not. You know, we could probably do it for less. You know, do we completely redo our logo and identity? No, because it just needs to be professional enough for now. But I also know that if you don't kind of set the logo, the brand correctly now, like you're not really going to change it much later anyway. So now is sort of the time, but without over investing in it, because logos don't make companies successful by, you know what I mean? It's kind of a hard call. If these guys were super flush with cash and we could do it, then I would do it. It's not that they're that tight, but I don't know. To me, it's not that efficient. So I'm going to go down a list of like, here's what I think we need to do to achieve our goals. Here are the things that are high leverage assets. Here are things that are one-way doors versus two-way doors. Here's what I suggest we start with. And here's a budget. You know, if we need to do a very high-end video, I know a guy. Here's an example of it. I think that would be good for us as a hero asset. We need to do a design. You know, we don't have a designer who's fully available. We might need to hire that. Or if you let me have this person now, we can work with that person for a bit and get it set. And then, you know, So we might need an implementation specialist on Webflow. I think it's all doable. And dude, I have like the rock star engineers on the planet, but they should be building products. So is that the best use of their time? Right. So I sort of have this sense of getting it set up and doing the basics with those folks. And, you know, I think that the rule of thumb, you and I think we're talking about this before we started recording, the rule of thumb around B2B SaaS marketing budgets, you know?
Right. All right.
It depends on the stage of the company, but I think the Gartner study I saw says it's around 10% of the revenue you want to hit is what you should be spending. So I might look
and just
at that
so you
as
know, the number
check.
I've always used is generally 8%, but I've heard as low as 6%. But you know, it's in that range. I think 8 to 10%.
I think it depends on, if the company's already quite big and revenue is scaled out, then maybe you don't need all of it. But if it's early stages, you might need to invest a little. So there's sort of a, you know, how much are you going to burn of the cash in the bank, right? So again, it's like you're making these suggestions that are good bets. So anyway, that's how I sell it. To me, it's not so much like I don't want it to feel like I show up with a spreadsheet and say, hey, now that you have a marketer here, here's what I need to do my job. It's more like, hey, we're, especially in a small company, right? Under 20 people.
Yeah.
It's like, we're a team and I am an executive that takes responsibility for managing the burn rate and getting bang for the buck and getting us to the next milestone so you can raise a great next round and whatever, right? So here's the way I think we can do it: high impact for the least amount of money, well enough, and kind of get these
It's
core
funny you
things
should
covered.
say that, because I was just gonna say that's first thing I do is bring in a spreadsheet. It's the first,
No, I bring in a
because
spreadsheet, but with a narrative around it.
yeah,
Well, at some point,
no, and I love the narrative because it makes more sense, and people think in narratives. Well, I think it's a bit different for us because our industry is it's a lot of
I can
engineers, so
rip
they
out.
do
Look,
think in terms of rationality and numbers. Look, the audience needs to know you are the master of
oh,
spreadsheets, right? I mean,
thank you.
well,
But
no, I
my
mean,
point, my
you do
point is,
you do your analysis. You're the numbers
yeah, my
guy, way
point
better
is
than
that
me.
my point is I can rip out a very nice looking budget that's good for a bigger company. I just don't think that these guys are used to that process. And so now they are engineers and you don't want to sell past the close. I hope this doesn't sound very pedantic to people. Basically, it's like your question was, how do I sell it? And there's figuring out what we really need. There's a certain amount of work I have to do ahead of time to figure out what we need and don't need, and probably get some quotes. And I have some vendors I like to use, the really smart independent contractors that I know will do a great job and probably fast and not very expensive. Like, that's the advantage of having worked a lot in the startup world, is you start to build up these folks
Right.
that
Your
you can trust
network.
and move
Yep.
fast with. Well, it's huge. And I can also show prior examples of, hey, here's how we did another company, which I think is similar to what we need here in this aspect. So look at that as reference. But my
Right.
point is, I think about what we're trying to get done from a business standpoint, how they're used to thinking about making decisions in this case. It's, again, this is not your big corporate, process. And so I'm trying to meet them where they are and not shoot myself in the foot, right, by showing off with my fancy pre-canned spreadsheet. And so now the other point I was going to make is there is this narrative. It's like, I want to figure out what we need. I want to be efficient and high impact. I want to think about the high leverage things that need to get done right, foundational pieces against a timeline we care about because we have a product launch in Q1, for example, that I have to keep in mind, and so on. So I kind of consider all that and I prioritize the work that way. And then I try to do the least amount of things to get us there, but do those things extremely well. Like, let's do the brand correctly. Let's do the layout and the design correctly. Let's put the basic tools in place correctly on a CMS and so on. That kind of stuff. So we can scale and we can collect data and start seeing who's coming through and making decisions on that and campaign. If we need to do a campaign, we have all that. So I think about that. Then, of course, I'm dealing with engineers who are going to outmath me no matter how good I am. And at some point, this is what I would say about selling past the close, is I could be telling the story and the guy's like, yeah, sure, fuck it. Just tell me what you need. Give me a number.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's like, glad you asked. Here's a spreadsheet. And then we start going down line items.
Right.
This isn't like I've got to ask for 10% or 20% over the budget I really want in a company because it's going to get shaved off. It's just like, look, I really have to figure out what exactly we need to get done and how those numbers are going to translate. And in fact, on an early forecast where there isn't a lot of historical data to rely upon,
Exactly.
so we're guessing a lot.
Yeah.
So it's like, look, some of it's rule of thumb, some of it's a hypothesis, some of it's knowing that these are the foundational things. And then, you kind of go through that and then you have your costs and be flexible about what we can and cannot do.
You hit on a really good point. And we have actually a podcast that we wanted to do. We've kind of got it mapped out about best practices, and my whole thing that there is no such thing as best practices in B2B tech, because every business is a black swan, meaning every one of them's unique. Everyone grows in its own way. So, you can bring experience, but my whole thing is you're bringing your ability to think on your feet and change where you need to change. And it's like we said earlier about stepping back and saying, well, maybe we just need an AI bot now on the website. I was just looking at some 6th Sense products that are these, effing amazing virtual BDRs. It's just mind-boggling what these AI bots do now. And maybe you
but
just
do I
need
put
that.
one on the website?
Yeah,
I don't know.
you don't need. But my point being is that you can think about best practices and selling something and looking back, so to speak. But the reality is what they're really paying you for is just to be really smart, integrate new technologies to hit those higher level goals we talked about, which are
I think that's
revenue,
right. And in this
whatever
case,
the business things are. So anyway, I was just like reinforcing, what you were saying about, you have to be able to adjust. You have to be able to look at the unique state that the business is in and what's the appropriate tool. And, don't get caught in some crusty way of thinking or way of doing things, because you'll die. You will
it's
die.
hard.
You will not.
It's very hard, Steve, because, wisdom, there's sayings about this, I'm sure, but, wisdom is that accrual of experience, translated into valuable lessons or something. So my point is, like, you and I have experience and therefore we have wisdom, and defining wisdom as things that are useful patterns to have been through. And, like, I guess, to me, the strategies and the objectives don't change over time, but the tactics and the tools change and the channels change, as we've talked about this, I think, before. But, to me, the hard part is, there's a black swan element to each new company for sure. But I'm also trying to get leverage, say, in my career and my capabilities by taking what I know to be true and applicable from other experiences and applying it here in a way that will accelerate this company's development. At the same time, staying open-minded and not being so rigid that I have a playbook that I've done here and I'm going to be forcing this square peg into a round hole. This is a different, unique company in a different stage with a little bit of a different audience. Technology is different, distribution is different. And so there's some things that I want to know we have to focus on because they're the right, like positioning needs to be done really well here. So there's actually quite a product marketing narrative element to a lot of the work I'm doing with the website. I know we're talking about websites, but someone smart once told me, websites are like therapy. Everything comes out. And this is the challenge with the website is you and I can talk about the website from all kinds of perspectives of data enrichment, prospect handling, lead generation, lead scoring, or just, basic calls to action, basic, compelling positioning that, I don't know, meets the user where they are. Who knows? And so there's all these things we have to think about. At this beginning stage, I need to have a great story, explain this company in a very compelling, persuasive way, have a really straightforward call to action, and work on all the quality signals and making sure that's in place, and making sure, almost like analogy sometimes I think about, it's like you build a nice big walk-in closet. So the structure is there and I can hang new pages in there. Like, I'm not going to launch with a knowledge center because it's going to take years to build up 12 white papers and 18 research papers and 24, customer testimonials or success stories per vertical. So it's like, I know we're going to hang that in there eventually. I know we're going to have a blog channel that's pretty active. We might not even have a dedicated product page when we start. Like, can the homepage handle that? Or am I going to go a split between higher level narrative of the company and enough to get you going if you're interested? Or if you need to go deeper, put that on a product page, which might be better for SEO anyway. So I just have to think about being able to add pages easily, add landing pages later, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm going to come out with probably a pretty lightweight website. I think the sitemap might have 8-10 pages max, right? Like, it just, but it has to be extensible. I have to have something I can build on. So I think about set up the walk-in closet properly, and you can hang lots of stuff and put your shoes here later and blah, 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 blah. So that's kind of where my head's at. And a lot of it is around the positioning of this company, the messaging we're going to have on that website, and the fundamentals of a good website, and thinking about some technology, because I'm making choices that could lock us into certain ecosystems over time.
All right. Well, do you think that's a good place to wrap up?
I think so. I think we've covered it all. It is, if you want to go find a checklist, there's a million of them. All the stuff on LinkedIn mostly is a bunch of listicles. So go find a listicle on what you should consider for your website. But when you really have to do it, write like it's a word problem in the 8th grade. Write exactly what you're trying to solve. Think about exactly what you're trying to solve, and really bang for the buck, and think of it like you're spending your own money to get it done. Because you are not in a startup. You are not in a big company where you're just kind of fighting for budget no matter what. I have to make this perform. And so I'm trying to think about like doing that now and making it easy to scale later. And I'm thinking about this context. I think that would be the main takeaway. And the website is a multifaceted thing. So
excellent. All right, Peter. Good stuff. See you next week.
All right, Steve. Good stuff, my friend.
Cheers.
Cheers, buddy.